Alright everybody, this is the third and final part of my Bioshock Versus video. I ended last time talking about the multiplayer and the rank up system. One thing I didn't mention just because of time constraints there was that each level in Bioshock 2's multiplayer, at least the ones that come with the disc, are rehashes of levels in the original Bioshock that you visited. But they are retooled, that they are smaller and limited to a specific area so that it makes sense for the gameplay. The multiplayer in Bioshock 2 also, there's a couple maps that were just released for download in the Metro map pack, and I haven't played a lot of those yet, but from what I've seen, they're pretty dang good. They're all like, well, not all of them, but most of them are levels from Bioshock 2 that they retooled for multiplayer, which is pretty cool. As far as the characters in each game goes, I mentioned that Atlas and Tenenbaum are two of the most important characters in Bioshock. You're also going to run into a guy named Sander Cohen in Fort Frolic, who is a guy who doesn't really like either Ryan or Atlas and just wants to toy with you, and he's incredibly crazy, but he's easily one of the most entertaining characters in the game. He's kind of based off Salvador Dali to an extent, and he's the head Houdini splicer in Rapture, and he's just gone bonkers, and he wants you to photograph all these dead bodies and then create this big collage for his masterpiece, and he won't let you out of his area until you complete that. But his mannerisms are so quirky and disturbing that he's a very entertaining character. Bioshock 2, the big players are Grace Holloway, who is in charge of the splicers who run Pauper's Drop, which is a very poor part of Rapture that was built kind of as a temporary stay for the railroad workers. Basically, before the bathysphere method of travel, there was this thing called the Atlantic Express, which was basically a train system that went around Rapture. And after the Atlantic Express kind of fell victim to the bathysphere's popularity, everyone who was working on the Atlantic Express, as well as some of the other poor people in Rapture, just moved to Pauper's Drop and were kind of forgotten about. There's also a guy named Gil Alexander, who is he was largely important in the development of the Big Daddies and their involvement in the Little Sister program. But in Bioshock 2, when you come across him, he's become a test subject for this thing called the Utopian program, and basically Sophia Lamb, the main antagonist in Bioshock 2, is trying to put all the thoughts of the Rapture people into Gil, or she already has actually, and it just caused him to go crazy. The intent was to create the perfect human to save everyone in Rapture from a doomed existence, and it just wound up making him crazy. He, to an extent, is the equivalent of Sander Cohen from Bioshock, but he's not nearly as entertaining simply because he's not nearly as crazy. He's still crazy, but he's not as quirky, and he doesn't like sing random songs at points and just yell at people over the intercom. He just hinders you a little bit. And he's still interesting though, because you receive audio diaries from the past him before he turned into this utopian person, and present day him, which is just the crazy guy stuck in a giant tube. So you've got that conflict between the two of them, which is interesting, but doesn't really stack up to Sander Cohen. The other major player you've got is a guy named Stanley Poole, who is a reporter for one of Rapture's newspapers and got into some trouble years ago with Sophia Lamb and Andrew Ryan, and basically wanted to make the most buck off of the two of them, and he wound up having to go into hiding. And when you come across him, he's got some tricks up his sleeve that ultimately don't really work out to his advantage, but basically he does the same thing as Cohen does in Fort Frolic. He locks you in one of the levels and has you complete some tasks for him before you can advance. Tenenbaum is in Bioshock 2 for a very brief, like, whole 10 minutes, and then she disappears, and there's really nothing explained as where she went to, but I presume she'll be back in Bioshock 3. Now, your, I guess, guide throughout Bioshock 2 is a guy named Augustus Sinclair. He's mentioned very briefly in the first Bioshock, but basically he's a businessman from Texas who got along okay with Ryan. Basically, I didn't see quite eye to eye, but basically he's responsible for a lot of the businesses that are open in Rapture. He kind of is a tycoon and likes to make a buck off whatever he can. And by the time Bioshock 2 rolls around, since the city's already just insane and Lamb's turned it into this kind of crazy religious cult thing, he wants to get out of Rapture. And he sees the best way of doing that as going with you. But he's not afraid to try and make some gains along the way either. So he's kind of a gambling man, and in that sense he's interesting. I wouldn't say he's as interesting of a guide as Atlas is in the first game, but he's still not bad. Then your main antagonist, taking over Andrew Ryan's role from the first game, is Sophia Lamb. And she is kind of a stereotypical villain to an extent. I mean, she's not like cackle, mwahaha, look how evil I am sort of a character, but she is a lot more prone to just say, I'm the greatest person the city has ever known, and you're trying to stop me, so I'm going to send people after you. Whereas with Ryan in the first game, calling him a bad guy isn't exactly accurate, as you find out later in the game, and even early on in the game, you could kind of determine from the events. But basically, Ryan's confused the whole time. He thinks you're someone that you're really not. So him being as paranoid as he is, thinks you're with the CIA or the KGB or something like that, and have come to steal all his secrets and exploit it to the world, and that's why he sends all his places after you. And those two elements of the characters in either game, combined with the story of either game, it really makes for a different experience with both games. Bioshock, the story is about Jack being an outsider looking in, coming to the city, and the whole battle between Atlas and Ryan, and the fact that whoever's the good guy or the bad guy in the game is completely up to your determination. You are free to figure out who's good and who's bad in the first game, however way you want. Bioshock 2 is a little bit more straightforward in who's good and who's bad. I mean, still there's a little bit of interpretation there, but it's... I'd say a lot of people are right when they say the story isn't as strong in Bioshock 2. It's not bad by any means. It's really good. But Bioshock arguably has a stronger story. Now, the difference, or the one thing that Bioshock 2 does get across very well is the storytelling techniques. I think it's a lot more engaging. I think it's a lot more involved, and just your interaction as a Big Daddy, since you are a member of Rapture's population, that you feel like you actually care about this character a little bit. In the first game, Jack's just kind of a nobody, and by the end of the game, he's still pretty much a nobody. There's a couple changes that happen in the game, but other than that, he's just kind of a guy with a name. Whereas playing as Delta in Bioshock 2, and having experience with the events of Bioshock, you can kind of get a feel for who he is a little bit. So, with all these things in mind, which of these is the better game? That's going to be completely up to you. Personally, I enjoyed Bioshock 2 a little bit more, but they're both fantastic games. So, you know, with the fact that Bioshock has a greater story, and Bioshock 2 improves on some of the gameplay mechanics a little bit, I'd say it's pretty much a tie. I mean, personally, I like Bioshock 2 a little bit more, but overall, I'd say it's pretty much a tie between the two of them. But, again, it's going to be completely up to your own personal taste in these games as to which one you like more. And that's pretty much it for my first Versus video game video. And I have a review of Bioshock 2 up on my blog, as well as a 25 Days of Christmas thing for the original Bioshock, and I'll post links in the description box. And with that, I will see you guys next time.